Welcome everyone to the fourth session of today's Hands-on Agile a mini conference here. I'm really happy that Johanna Rothman was able to make time and join us here because she is great at what she's doing, and you may have seen a lot of stuff on her already, but today she is here in person and she will talk about fake agility and actually how you can get better at this. Maybe that's a reason why so many people are not embracing agility to the level that would be possible. Just check out a few of the subreddits and you will immediately understand what we're talking about. So, Johanna, stage is yours.
I am very happy to be here. Thank you all. You can see I'm not in my home office, so the hair is curlier and the background is a little bit nuts, but that's okay. I'm going to talk about fake agile because that is the norm of what I see in the industry, that we have agile everything, but we are not using agility in our work. So let me explain what I mean by that. When I speak with my clients, whether they're senior executives or managers and directors or teams, everyone tells me, we're agile. We do stand-ups. So, and then when I say to them, what if you didn't have to do a stand-up? Right. Would that mean you were still agile? And they say, we don't have to do stand-ups. So this is why I'm very big on thinking about agility at all levels, as opposed to any specific agile practices. Because here's what I see. I see a lot of senior leaders who want long and extensive backlogs and roadmaps, and sometimes the product leaders want them too. That often leads to teams being feature factories with insufficient product strategy, where they say, the product leader says, do this thing, and then do this thing, and then do this thing, and then do that thing. And all of those things are not in service of business value of a product. I see all those long and extensive backlogs have very little experimentation built into them. That means that as people learn, there's a lot of late changes. And worse, there's no joy or ease. It's all a grind of work. Come into work, you write your code, you write your tests. Maybe you end up with a product at some point, but it sure feels terrible. So, and that all of that leads to insufficient speed, right? That senior leaders say, why are my teams so slow? They want a lot more done now, right? Agile promised twice the work in half the time, which is stupid, right? That's just nuts. Nobody can deliver twice the work in half the time. However, you can make it so you can deliver better work faster and then decide what to do next. Now, if I think about this, culture is really the root cause. Most organizations are really focused on resource efficiency. That's where the work assignment comes in, and the first expert takes that work, does their thing, they hand it off to the next expert. They do their thing, they hand it off to the next expert, et cetera, et cetera. You finally get the finished work product. Every single one of these arrows is a delay. Every single one. So imagine a 3-tier architecture where you have the UI on top with the API, and then the app layer, the middleware, and the platform. If you have experts in all of those, even if it's a cross-functional team, and maybe the platform person works on it first, and then they hand it off to the middleware, they hand it off to the app layer, you can see where I'm going with this. Everything takes a lot longer. What agility requires is flow efficiency thinking. That's where the team as a whole finishes work so that there are no my parts, right? This is the fastest way to work. So, and And most managers are still stuck in resource efficiency thinking because they think they have to reward individuals for what those individuals do. And they can't possibly reward teams. It's just nuts. So without a flow efficiency culture, agility can never really take root. So, but you have options for how you can manage your feedback loops, right? All of these, let me see if I can go backwards. All of these handoffs often require feedback loops because the third person says, oh, this changes what the first person says. Okay. So if you want to think about agility, then it's all a matter of risk. So let me first talk about the three major kinds of risks, because each of those risks will drive your choices for the feedback loop duration that you need or want. Let me first separate them out. There are project risks, product risks, and portfolio and organization risks. Right. So let me first talk about the project risks. So when I wrote Manage It, Your Guide to Modern Pragmatic Project Management, back, 20 years ago, I think, I talked about what drives your project, what constrains your project, and the degrees of freedom you need for floats so that you have options for what to do when things don't work out, right? Things are never going to work out perfectly. So let's talk about the trade-offs up in advance. Now, let me talk about what the team has total control over. The team can drive what feature set can the team actually deliver in which time with the quality, right? The team is totally in charge of this. However, if managers don't want to fund the project enough, then the team will sacrifice something. If you don't have enough people who are not multitasking all on this one project, and if they don't have sufficient experience, they cannot deliver a feature set in any kind of time with any kind of quality. And then there's a work environment. Are you working in a place where everyone is at long tables or maybe has a cube, but the noise is so loud that people use their headsets all the time, right? If everyone has a headset, no one is collaborating. So all of these risks will affect your life cycle choice. Now, when I say one aspect drives your project, I say either the feature set or the time to release or the load defects or the cost or the people or the work environment. Only one of those, right? It's not give me two and I'll get you the third. No, only one can drive your project. Then there are two that can constrain your project. And then you have to be able to float the other three. When I talk to managers about the cost to deliver a useful product, they all say, well, we have to maintain our costs, right? And they make a bounding box with their hands. And I say, so let me ask you this. It's 3 weeks before the end of the project. You don't quite have the feature set. You're not going to make the time if you have all the features. And we are worried about the quality. We have several defects we have not been able to fix. If they say, you will release it in 3 weeks, I know it's time. If they say, no, we have to have all those features, then I know it's the feature set. If they say, we cannot negotiate on quality, we have to have really high quality, then I know quality is driving it. And if they say, we just cannot go over the cost for this project, we are not willing to invest more, then I know cost is really the issue, and we will trade off all these other things for costs. I have yet to see cost really drive a project. I have seen a couple, but not many. And almost always it was because we did not make the trade-offs we wanted to here. So if you think about the various risks in your project, right? A project exists to as a container to release a product, right? So that's why it's very helpful to think about project risks. Now, let me talk about product risks because those are about the innovation your product needs. Sometimes we have totally deterministic projects where one of my clients said, this port is a totally deterministic project. We do not need to do any discovery here. No discovery at all. And that same organization said, we, on the other hand, this particular product, we think we know what the customer needs, and we are not sure. We need to experiment all the time. We need to release something to our very special customers. They were not willing to release to the entire outside world, but they had a cadre of maybe 5 or 6 special customers who were willing to work with them. And they had to use an agile approach for this particular product. In fact, they released something at least 2 or 3 times a week and experimented and got feedback from these customers. Most of us work in this messy middle where we have some requirement for innovation, but not total requirements for innovation. So we need to iterate over the requirements. We need to release every so often. We have choices here based on our innovation needs. However, that client with the port where they said, we're going to just go from this hardware to that hardware. We're not going to change anything. Well, of course, they found at the beginning of the project, they found a hidden defect that when they unhid it, when they fix it, made cascading defects all over the place. They moved from a totally deterministic problem to much more innovation requirements. Not totally agile, but much more innovation needs. So the reason I am very focused on the product risks is because as soon as the customer sees it, they say, oh, that's really good. Now can I have blah, 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 right? All of you have seen that. Or you have heard, you gave me what I asked for, but it's not what I need. So all of those risks will determine which life cycles make the most sense for your particular project to ship this particular product. Okay, now let me talk about portfolio risks. The more often your senior leaders want to change the project portfolio, the more frequently you need to release something so that you are at a reasonable place in this product development. So you might have to stop. You might have to change it so it's a program. You might have to stop this one and go on to a different product. All of our companies make choices about what is most important now. And the more your organization wants to plan once for the year, the more they will be surprised. And so if you are like me, even if you cannot use a strictly agile approach, you will find ways to release increments of value on a regular basis. That might be an incremental life cycle as opposed to a totally agile approach. So I have found, so let me just bring in AI just for a minute here. So I had this lovely conversation with Stefan earlier this year. I think it was in January, and he explained a whole bunch of things to me about it. Oh, okay. I'm learning. I'm figuring out how to prompt. I'm having a good time because I'm learning. And then came DeepSeek, right? So DeepSeek, because it was open source and way less expensive than all the other models. Totally changed the entire landscape for AI, right? We are, all the AI companies who were doing stuff in the US before are now saying, holy moly. Well, they were probably saying something else. But if we stick with the holy moly, their market has totally changed. That means that they need to change their project portfolios to be able to say, how can we compete with DeepSeek? This is how the hype cycle goes. This is how new product introductions go. Everything changes in the market. So the more we change the market, the more often your organization needs to re-choose the project portfolio. And if you only choose for an entire year at a time, you will be surprised and not pleasantly. So all of these risks affect the life cycle that we have, that we choose. And the more risks we had in the project, in the product, in the portfolio, the more we need to reduce the feedback loop duration, right? How long does it take us to release an increment of value? So I have a question that I hope you will put in the chat. I would like to see how you assess your collaboration to enable agility. And I will not use anybody's name when I look at this. So in a 1, if you have a 1, everyone always works alone. That's a resource efficiency based team. If you have a 5, the team always collaborates on everything. That would be mobbing or software teaming. In the middle, I put a 3. We collaborate on urgent issues. 4 is sometimes people work alone, right? Mostly we collaborate a lot. And 2 is sometimes people work together. I'm seeing a lot of 4s. Oh, this is excellent. Oh my goodness. I suspect that most of you are in Europe, and I have always found, I see a couple of 2s there. In my experience, the Europeans are much farther ahead than the US is when it comes to collaboration. That's because we are so focused here on resource efficiency. Not because, and I'm not blaming the managers for that. It's an entire system. So it's really important that we understand. Well, I see, this is good. I see a lot of 4s. I see some 3s and 2s. So everyone is, at least sometimes people work together. So the more agility you want, the more you need to be at the 3 level and above, because the more people learn how to collaborate on the urgent issues, the more agility they will have in their team. Okay. Let me get back here. This is, I am not quite where I need to be. That's okay. All right. So let me first talk about clarifying life cycles so you will understand what I mean. The serial life cycle, right? The waterfall, stage gate, phases, whatever it is. The characteristics of serial life cycles is you plan a whole lot up front before you get to coding and testing. So you do the requirements, the analysis, the design, you might even write the code. You finally integrate the code, and then you start to test. Notice you don't know anything about the value of the product until you at least get to testing. So in organizations that still use a form of a serial life cycle, you might have heard water scrumfall, right? Where you do the requirements analysis and design before you go into sprints with code integration and test. If you think product development is a simple matter of execution, maybe this would work. I have never seen that happen. So this is the reality for too many so-called agile teams. Notice when the requirements keep going and we iterate on the requirements, this is requirements hell. It's often characterized when your roadmap has 0 experiments and extends past 30 days, right? Most of us can see about a month in advance. Very few of us can really see much farther out. Um, I have seen a lot of organizations want to know when we will freeze, when will we have requirements freeze, architecture freeze, design freeze, code freeze. This is all about CapEx and OpEx, capitalization and operations. So the more your organization wants to capitalize what they are doing, the more they need to know about code freeze. Except a real agile approach allows everybody to capitalize everything because you're finishing something every day or 2 or 3 or 4. Okay. All these waterfall approaches, even if you call them agile, it all needs unplanned feedback loops. So you think you do requirements analysis and design, and then you say, oops, we have a change in requirements. Or you get to code and you say, oops, we have a change in analysis. You get to integration and you say, oops, 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 we have changes in requirements analysis, design, and code. And then, of course, with tests, we have many more changes. So the more you try and do upfront without testing as you go, and I mean testing in all senses of the word, where you write the code, you try and integrate the code, you actually test the code, and even release the code, right? So that you actually test it for the users. The longer it takes you to do any of that, the more unplanned feedback loops you have. That is the essence of a waterfall approach. Now, there are iterative life cycles where you iterate on prototypes. Veeam first came out with this spiral model. There is evolutionary prototyping and also SAFe, because the longer you take to release something to the customer, the more iterative it is. And now iterative is useful, but the longer it takes you to finish anything, the more likely you are to have a project kiss of death, right? You discover something late, and that changes the requirements, which changes every single thing you have done. Now, if you're only doing prototypes, maybe that's fine. But most customers don't want prototypes. They want increments of value that you have tested. And well, there sometimes if you have internal versus external feedback. So the client I talked about at the beginning, where they said, well, we had the small cadre of customers then we want to test our prototypes with, they actually delivered something, but they might have been able to do some prototypes. But the longer it takes for real customer feedback, the more likely you are to not know what's going on. So, with incremental life cycles, there are 2 major incremental life cycles. One is designed to schedule, which focuses on release candidates. When I used a design to schedule life cycle once because not actually delivering something made me a little nutso. So, and we at the time we chose the highest ranking feature by risk, not by value. What? Sue me, right? It was the 90s, the 1990s. So, all of these, so design to schedule can be really helpful, especially if you are willing to take a release candidate and actually release it. Now, in a stage delivery approach, this is you actually finish and release feature sets at a time. Now, back in the 90s, when I used stage delivery, we released the entire feature set. Do I say that now? No, I have learned since then. You can, if you only really, this is where the idea of an MVP can really help you. If you can only do stage delivery, because this is because your managers want long roadmaps, they really want to see all this documentation. fine. You can do that. But then you can say, in this feature set, what is the minimum I need to do? How little can I do to release this feature set and get a useful release that our customers can use? Right. So stage delivery is both of the incremental life cycles are very useful for teams that cannot really do an agile approach. Now, we might have late feedback in incremental life cycles too. So, especially if you have a low priority feature set that changes everything that came before, the nice thing about a release candidate is you can actually release before this, right? I'm assuming everyone uses some form of version control. If you have version control, you can say, let's checkpoint everything with the release candidate. We can release here. It's all good. Now, in stage delivery, what's really interesting is as long as you have released something up until you have this potential project case of death, you can just say, oh, we meant to finish this project over here. We will call it a release. We will declare victory and then figure out what to do about all of these potential problems in the next release. But notice you are not making customers wait for the next release. This is really important. Okay, now I happen to like combining approaches. If you have a date-driven project, you can iterate on prototypes and then move into implementing features and releasing on a regular basis. Is there a name for this? No, it's a combination life cycle that just changes it's whatever you want to call it. For much of for many of my clients in the 90s and the O's, it was the JR approach. Fine, that was great, and I often said to them, make it your own approach, right? You are in charge of your approach. One of my clients actually did this. They had a feature-driven approach, and they needed to iterate on what the features actually looked like with evolutionary prototyping. So they used a 6-week time box to do evolutionary prototyping. They did another 6-week time box on the next set of requirements, and then they finally released. Now, the interesting thing here is that took them an entire quarter to release. And of course, all of the requirements grew. They had more and more and more requirements. So they said to me, the program manager here was really smart. And she said, should I extend the time box? I said, no, shorten it, right? Instead of a 6-week time box, make a 3-week time box or 2-week time box. Do your prototyping, test it out with your careful clients or inside the organization, and then move into releasing as early as possible because you need more feedback from your customers to figure out what's going on. Okay. All right, I'm going to talk about clarifying what agility really is. Any agile approach requires a collaborative, cross-functional team, right? These people are not component teams, they are a cross-functional team. An agile approach limits and ranks the width. So this is a limited and ranked backlog. I don't care how many items are in the backlog, it's what the team can do now. The team releases increments of value on a regular basis, and they learn from what they did. They learn from the demo, and they learn from the retrospective. Now, this is called an agile approach. Notice it's not agile/Scrum. Scrum is one agile framework, and you don't need an agile framework to actually use an agile approach. All you need is the principles of a collaborative, cross-functional team that limits and ranks its WIP, that releases often for feedback, that does a demo and a retrospective, right? That allows you to think about the agility of the team and the agility of the organization, not agile. Agile is an adjective. And we want the property of agility in our teams. So when I say agile approaches are not life cycles, I mean, it's really a culture change, right? If everybody is supposed to work alone, you flunk the first principle of the agile team, a collaborative team. So, and apologies to my mindset people. Agile is not a mindset. I often say I had the mindset of losing weight for years. And until I changed my culture around food and my practices around how I would organize my life, I could not change. So I had the mindset. A mindset is not enough. And I also had to change what I did as I approached my goal weight. Yeah, and I'm not there yet, but that's fine. I keep changing my approaches because I am learning as I go, right? I'm every time I weigh myself, that's an animal. And every time I look at what I ate yesterday, that's a retrospective. Um, really, I'm not gonna tell you how to eat. I will only tell myself how to eat. But any kind of a life cycle is a specific approach for a team. And life cycles tend not to change as the team changes. And that's why thinking about your options as your team changes really works very well. Now remember this, agile teams always work through the architecture to deliver. This is a very simplified architecture. It's fine because I'm not going to have all the pieces of an architecture here. And as long as the team is making small stories all the way through the architecture, the team can release something on a fairly regular basis. Now, component teams are a challenge for absolutely everything. I really like component teams that check in every single day. And if you want, I have a newsletter article on this if you want to see more about that. So there are two main agile approaches. One is a time box, where the team limits its WIP to fit into a time box. This does not mean the team has to push every possible thing they might be able to do into the time box. Instead, the team can say, what is a reasonable amount of work that we have proven we can all already finish in a time box? And because by definition, the work is done at the end of the time box. You reassess all the work, not just the retrospective and the demo. Now, a Kanban approach does not need time boxes, and you don't need a formal method for a Kanban approach either. The team limits its WIP by design, right? Width is that work in progress. So some features are large, some features are small. I really like to right size the work so the team delivers on a regular cadence. One of my clients does planning every Monday and Thursday. That's a cadence of planning. They plan one or two things when they plan, right? They are planning just in time. They right size the work so that if the entire team or subsets of the team works on it, they are pretty sure they can deliver. They They always demo and they record the demo on Wednesday morning, and they always do a retrospective on Friday. I think Fridays are a terrible day for a retrospective, but they did not ask me, right? They say, JR, we like Fridays. Okay, fine. You like Fridays. So, notice that approach with a lot of agility in the team, but it's not a formal agile approach. You can do exactly the same as that client, right? You don't have to be bound by a particular framework. And the more agility you incorporate into your work, the more you will realize frameworks might help to start, but they are not where you need to be. Now, If you cannot really use an agile approach, and most of you are, when I asked about collaboration, then most of you seem to work together most of the time. Um, if you can use an agile approach. But if you cannot really use an agile approach, if you are at a 3 or a 2 on that collaboration poll, don't make yourself nuts. Choose an iterative or an incremental or combination life cycle, right? And I have guidelines here. If you have if the date is the biggest risk, choose an incremental or an agile approach. Low defects, same thing. More features, use an iterative or an agile approach. If you know what you need to do and you are working on something very short for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, such as a very problematic defect, you can use a serial or an incremental approach because the requirements are not going to change. So, but if you have a longer time frame, use anything other than a serial approach. Even a totally iterative prototype based approach is better than a serial approach. So, the longer the time frame, the more adaptability you need in everything: the backlog for the team, the roadmap for the product, and the strategy for the organization. Now, let me ask about WIP limits here, because this is always something I'm curious about. In the chat, please use a poll for your answer. Can you limit WIP? If you can never say no, if everybody can add anything to your backlog or the roadmap, please put in a 1. If you say 5, we always limit WIP. We always finish what we start before taking on new work. If you're a 3, we try, but the urgent work interrupts us. 4 is we sometimes have to take on production support. And if you're a 2, we take shortcuts. And those often come back to bite us. So, what is your WIP limit? Oh, I see I am not up to date in the chat. 3, 3, 3, 4 is 3 to 4. Oh, sometimes 1. Sorry, 1. Yeah, 4. So, if you cannot say no to anything ever, you will always feel the pressure of way too much WIP. Worse, the flow metrics will show you why that pressure is terrible. I see a bunch of 3s and 4s. I would say if you have urgent work or production support, and if you're using a time box, I would say stop filling up the time box. Only fill the time box halfway, because you can always add more work to the time box. But figuring out how to finish all the work creates pressure. The more for I didn't see any 5s. Let me see if I can. Yeah, I did not see any 5s in here, but I did see a whole lot of 4s. With production support, I often say move to a Kanban approach. Don't use do not use time boxes, because in a Kanban approach, you have a much easier time measuring your cycle time, and you can ask for urgent things or production support. And in general, we finish the thing we are working on within a few hours. Can we wait for production support for this item for production support after we finished this thing? And the answer might be no, right? And it might be no, in which case you put this thing aside and go onto production support. But without knowing your cycle time, it's really hard for you to have reasonable WIP limits. Okay. So let me talk about how to increase agility, because that's really the issue. The first thing is in the team. Collaborate on fewer things. So think about how many people are off on their own thing. And especially, are you separating code review from coding? The more you separate code review from the person, imagine there's a person who does the code, and then there's a pull request for code review. Well, there's going to be at least several hours, if not a day or two, before that person gets to the code review. What happens to the first person? They write more code. They take another item off the backlog. Now we have a developer with 2 items in progress. This requires multitasking. We are working as individuals, right? Instead of as a team. So I like to say, make sure you look and you work as one team, not multitask individuals. Watch the work and not the people. While I have a lot of respect for Atlassian, almost everybody I know uses Jira, and there's one major defect in Jira, and that is that an item gets assigned to a person, not a team. So that's why I really like value stream mapping, to see your collaboration versus cooperation. And instead of upfront planning, I really like Hudson Bay Start. I believe I have a link in the links at the end for what a Hudson Bay Start is. Now, there's also flow metrics. I don't know how many of you are trying to measure velocity. Velocity is ideal time. It's almost always accurate, but it does not account for all the delays in your system, in your team. So measure cycle time instead, because little saw is true. You cannot work your way around little saw except to reduce the WIP, the work in progress, that will allow you to shorten your cycle time and increase your throughput. If you are not familiar with the flow metrics, I will introduce those to you in another link at the end. Now, then there's culture and project tips. So, how often can you get feedback, even if it's just inside the organization with demos? How often can you get customer feedback? How often can you do the retrospectives? One of my clients many years ago said, my customers and my managers keep adding all these requirements to my project. And she said, maybe I should just have release 1.1 and release 1.2. And I said, yes. And then have release 1.3 and 1.4. And that will allow you to release more often with less stuff. The more you can shorten your projects, that will help you reduce the unplanned feedback loops. And then how often can you deliver and demo? One of my clients has a lot of trouble delivering and demoing once a month. They are working to get to reliably once a month. And then they will go to once every 3 weeks, then once every 2 weeks, then once a week, then once a day, then multiple times per day. But all of this is changing the culture of their organization. They have to really work on collaboration across the organization. So the real issue is the less planning and the more delivering, the more you can have real agility. So if you think about how you can instill real agility, how often can you satisfy the customer with a working product? I often say to obtain revenue, even if it's not real revenue, it's revenue and the application of your product inside the organization. That means you have to collaborate and use risks to figure out what makes sense for you. The more you can incorporate agility, the more you can bring joy and ease back to your work. So I wrote a lot of books and I've organized them here. However, I would like you to stay in touch, and the value stream maps here in measure cycle time, not velocity, talk about cooperative and collaborative and expert-driven teams. The Flow Metrics newsletter is, I think, really important, and I think that's it. I think I made it. Oh, I just made it. I'm going to stop the share so I can see your smiling faces. And if Stefan will allow me, I will take questions.
Of course, absolutely, because we already have 3 in the backlog, so to speak. Okay, let's have the first one. Asking for a friend. How would you influence those managers not respecting the trade-offs in the project risk triangle, who insist on all 3 constraints being met, no matter how, in an authoritarian way? They have managerial power over the careers of their employees after all.
So that's when I say, what makes a difference to you? Because they're talking about their power, right? So what makes a difference to you personally? How can I help you achieve your particular goals? Right? That I know that does not make sense because it looks like I'm placating them, but that's how I have found a better option for these people who are not respecting reality. And then I say, what really matters, right? Let's talk about the question 3 weeks before the end of the project. I mean, what decisions will you really make? I am asking you now, a few months before the end of the project, so we can have a rational discussion. But really think about the last time you insisted on everything. Everything was the number one priority, and we discovered it was really the feature set. And then right after that was the time, right, the date to release. And then right after that was the quality. But that allows me to make better choices and make better trade-offs as we go. So the first question is, yeah, how can I help you succeed? And the second question is, let's examine reality. Because, I mean, these things happen in every single company. Why would we not respect reality?
Okay, next one. Delivering small batches more often exposes the bad economics overhead of the release process. How do you get people to take this challenge rather than trying to cram more features in this process as a way to justify the economics?
So in the old Agile, right, a long time ago, we said if it hurts, do it more often. The reason we have bad economics in the release process often is because there's a gate, right? There's either a deployment team or a release team. And so the first thing I really like to do is to ask those people to collaborate with me. And this is where if I'm an Agile project manager, scrum master, any kind of facilitator for the team, I will actually say, here, my nice deployment people, let's have a conversation about how your team and my team can collaborate. And now, do I care about the other teams? No, I'm going to be selfish and work on my team because my team is the most important to me, right? If the company is still stuck on resource efficiency, I have to use that resource efficiency thinking to make my team more important than anybody else's team. I realize this sounds terrible. I don't care. Right? I want my team to succeed. And when my team and the deployment team start to make things work, that's when everyone says, Johanna's team is working. Why is my team not working? Right? This is change by attraction. There is no way I'm going to use logic in anything, right? People rarely change with logic. Instead, people change with stories and experiences. So let me change an experience, create a story around that, and use that as a lever for change.
Answer the what is in for me question. It's most
Yeah,
important. That's what people are interested
absolutely.
in. So people don't care for the big picture and a lot of other things when it personally comes to their own fate.
No,
Yes,
no,
it's very human. Otherwise, we
yeah.
wouldn't have survived. No. Third question. I ask one of our LNMs to compact this whole thing now. It's better digestible. How can organizations empower stakeholders and users to recognize and challenge fake agile? When teams misuse agile terminology, skip essential practices like sprint reviews, or fail to deliver meaningful change, how can we ensure accountability for genuine agility?
So instead of accountability for genuine agility, I really like to start where I am, right? I think that if we offer stakeholders the idea of long feedback loops, don't get them what they want, right? If we say our cycle time is too long, that means our feedback loops are too long. Would you like us to finish work faster? And they say, yeah, of course I do. That means we can say, so that means I have to start working on so much. This is where I find Little's Law really, really helpful. If we explain Little's Law and use simple explanations for it, like the typical bank problem, right? If you go to a bank and they have 3 tellers, and there are 3 people standing in line at each of the 3 tellers, right? I'm always in the line that takes the longest. Even when I go to the grocery store and I use the self-checkout, I'm always in the line that takes the longest. And this is everybody can relate to that story. So use that story and say, if they had more checkout lines, if they had more tellers, that would allow us more throughput, right? That means our cycle time is lower. That use Little's Law as a way to tell stories and help the stakeholders realize what they want, because everyone already thinks they're agile. So talk about shortening the feedback loops to get them what they really want. A product's at the door, capitalization, more revenue, all that good stuff.
Johanna, that was awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time, even when you're not at home, but are traveling, apparently, and share your knowledge, wisdom, and insight with us. It's always a pleasure, and we can repeat this many, many times more often. So I really, really appreciate that.
And thank you, Stefan, for the invitation. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited, and please do stay in touch.
Absolutely. Please follow Johanna on LinkedIn. It's really very, very, very helpful. I can say, and she also has a great blog, so don't miss out on that one.